Howdy. Sorry I couldn't be in class yesterday, but here I am broadcasting to you from home to talk to you about backward planning and understanding by design. Hopefully y'all had a chance to watch the videos and look over the template that I provided you last week. And my goal for today is to take a little bit of time to kind of expand on that and talk about how we're going to use backward planning and understanding by design to start with developing our curriculum maps, and ultimately that will lead to the unit plans, which will be the second to last thing we do this semester. So stick with me, and at the end of the presentation I will go over the expectations for the project. The first thing I want you to do, and this would have been our Nearpod question yesterday, as you can see at the top of the screen, I want you to take a minute and think about a course and a grade level that you would like to focus on developing your curriculum map and unit plan for. And then I want you to create a one-sentence mission statement that captures what the students will know and be able to do at the end of the school year as a result of going through your course. This mission statement should be broad enough to cover the scope of the course that you would be teaching from August until May, but it should be specific enough. It should go beyond the words just students will understand. What does it mean for them to understand a concept? What does it mean for them to be able to perform a skill? A one-sentence summary of your course. At this point, go ahead and hit pause, jot down a rough draft of your course mission statement, and then hit play and keep going. So now that you have your mission statement written out, let's take a look at it and let's think about it this way. If that course mission statement is the long-term goal, the ultimate goal for our class, then we need to be thinking about, well, what does that mean for assessment? What are we going to assess? How are we going to assess it? And how are we going to be able to use those assessments to judge how the class is coming along as far as mastering the concepts and the skills that we're presenting? Well, if we want to get to those assessments, we need to know, well, what does that mean for our instruction? What do we need to be doing in and outside of the classroom to facilitate the learning that supports the assessments that reveal mastery of the learning goals outlined by our mission statement? And that's why it's important that we plan backward. We need to start with the end in mind and then move on from there. As you should have learned from the videos you watched over the last week, backward planning is when we plan with the end in mind. So we're working with our students toward a common goal, which in this case is going to be outlined by our course mission statement. We want to determine how are we going to get each student, regardless of their ability level, their motivation level, their zone of proximal development, how are we going to get each student to that goal by the end of the school year? And how are we going to provide each student with the opportunity to, in fact, reach the goal that we've set for them? When we talk about understanding by design, or UBD, what we're talking about is a framework for our backward planning, a strategy to use to help outline from course mission statement to the actual assessments and what's going to be going on in our classes. It's a way of thinking of thinking about and aligning teaching and assessments with the standards and the desired learning outcomes. This is not at all something that dictates a teaching style. In fact, it is just a goal for us to increase the likelihood that when we teach, our teaching, everything we do in our classroom is outcome focused, it's goal focused, and having to do with what we want our students to master. UBD is predicated on 3 different types of learning for understanding. First, we have to worry about acquisition of knowledge, and this is just the students literally starting to learn the facts, learn the terminology, learn the basic skills. Then we want to start getting into meaning making, where they're actually internalizing what it is that they're learning, that knowledge that they have acquired. Not only just memorizing facts and definitions, but actually starting to be able to restate those definitions or explain those concepts in their own words. So they've made meaning of the knowledge and started to internalize it into their personal schema and cache of information. Next, we shift into knowledge transfer. So from here, this is where students should be able to take what they've learned and made meaning of and apply it to other situations and transfer that knowledge into other areas. So those are our big goals for learning, and that's where we get this idea of the UBD framework from. So keeping those kinds of desired learning outcomes in mind, we want to make sure that we are using UBD to plan our curriculum backward through 3 stages. The first thing that we need to think about is identifying the desired results for our students. What is it that we want them to learn? Then we're going to determine what acceptable evidence can be used to demonstrate their learning. So how will we know they've learned it? That'll pretty much be assessments. And then finally, we can get down to planning the learning experiences the students will have and the instruction that we will deliver. So how are we going to teach them to help them learn the information outlined in the first section? So keeping that in mind, this week we're really going to focus on stage 1, identifying the desired results. We're going to come back to stages 2 and 3 of UBD in a couple of weeks when we start getting into the unit planning. But for now, and for the purposes of our curriculum map, we really just want to focus on stage 1. This template should look very familiar as you look through the PDF file that I put on eCampus for you last week. You should have seen this template as well as several examples of what it looks like once it's actually been filled out. This is the template just for stage 1 of UBD, and as you can see, what we're going to be talking about are the established goals, the understandings or the enduring understandings, the essential questions, and then the actual student learning objectives. Students will know and students will be able to. For our purposes, you are going to be creating ultimately a stage 1 for each unit, okay? So we're going to talk about the curriculum map more in a little bit, but just know that this is what you're focusing on for the curriculum map, and you're going to be creating multiple that go in successive units. So let's start with our established goals. The first thing that we need to determine is what content standards or TEKS you're going to cover for the unit. So if we go back to our mission statement that we developed at the beginning of this lecture, each one of our units is going to have a separate set of established goals, or TEKS in our case, and each one of those combined TEKS across all of the units are going to come together to address the mission statement for the entire course, okay? So we started with the big mission statement, now we're working backward in individual units, and we're starting with our TEKS, our established goals. For our purposes, we are going to assume that a unit is 6 weeks long with no holidays, so that's 30 days of instruction. So keeping in mind your math and or science standards, whatever you're going to use for your curriculum map and ultimately your unit plan, you need to think about 1 6 weeks unit. What is a reasonable amount of TEKS that you are going to be able to cover and cover thoroughly in that 6 weeks time, in those 30 days of instruction? Draw on your experiences in your other courses, your math and science methods, courses that you've taken, your experiences as field students in the classroom, and I'm going to rely on you to determine what is appropriate for each unit of the course and grade level that you're planning for. And you really want to focus on those big anchor standards, the big TEKS, the numbers, okay? And you may not address all the small TEKS that fall under a certain big TEK, but if you are going to only address a few of them, you're going to want to specify that. Going back to our template, now we're going to look at our enduring understandings, which are right over here, okay? Then we're going to look at our essential questions. And it's important to keep in mind that these two things are parallel in our template, so they should go hand in hand. So as I said, the enduring understandings and the essential questions are next to each other in the template. So every enduring understanding should have a companion essential question, okay? Our enduring understandings are going to be our big ideas, which we'll talk a little bit more about, and our essential questions are going to give us that focal point for our teaching and learning throughout the unit. So now we need to figure out, well, how do we determine our enduring understandings and our essential questions? And the answer is we're going to unpack our standards. To unpack the standards, we're going to go back and look at those TEKs, those standards that we've decided are going to be the learning outcomes, the goals for our unit. And the first thing we're going to want to do is, for our purposes today, we're going to highlight the nouns and the adjectives, which are going to help us determine our enduring understandings and essential questions. Later, we would go back and highlight the verbs in a different color to help us determine what our assessments are going to be. But we're going to come back to that later. Right now, we're really just going to focus again on our desired outcomes. So enduring understandings and essential questions are the topic of the day. So for the sake of an example, let's go ahead and take a look at an English language arts TEK. Write arguments to support claims in an analysis of substantive texts using valid reasoning and relevant and sufficient evidence. So the first thing we want to do is take a look at our nouns and adjectives to help us figure out what our enduring understanding and essential questions are going to be. So for today, I'm really going to focus on our nouns. They're mainly arguments, claims, and evidence. So what I want to do is think about my students constructing arguments, supporting claims, and providing sufficient evidence, and how is that going to translate into my big ideas, my enduring understandings, which will then turn into my essential questions. So with that in mind, here are my enduring understandings with the light blue bullets, and then with the darker blue bullets, I have an essential question for each one. So when I am specifically talking about arguments, my enduring understanding is going to be writers and speakers use language to construct arguments in order to persuade our audience. That is my big idea regarding arguments that I want my students to really, truly, deeply understand by the end of my unit. And so to guide that understanding, I provide them with the essential question: what makes an argument persuasive? When it comes to my claims, supporting claims with an argument, my enduring understanding is, for an argument to be persuasive, the writers and speakers' claims must be well supported. So my essential question: how do writers and speakers support their claims? And then finally, in order to address providing sufficient evidence, my enduring understanding is, to support a claim, writers and speakers must present relevant and sufficient evidence. So my following essential question is, what and how much evidence do writers and speakers need to support their claims? So you can see these enduring understandings and these essential questions came directly from the standard that I selected. Now, I know all my math and science geeks out there want me to give them an example. So here's one for math. These are some sets of enduring understandings and essential questions. As you can see, for the first understanding, I have 2 questions. And that's okay. You only want to do that when you need it. But my enduring understanding is, mathematicians create models to interpret and predict the behavior of real-world phenomena. So my essential questions are, how can we best model the real-world phenomena, and how reliable are the model's predictions? My second enduring understanding is, mathematical models have limits and sometimes they distort or misrepresent. So the question, what are the limits of our model? Keeping in mind that our enduring understandings are the big ideas that we've derived from our standards, and our essential questions are going to be used to actually kind of drive our instruction and our students' learning. I want to spend a little bit more time talking about the essential questions because they can be tricky. So here's the teachable moment. This is a strategy you can use in your classrooms, and what it's called is concept attainment, and it's a method for determining definition of a concept, something that we want to understand more about. And in this case, we want to better understand essential questions. So the first thing we're going to do is compare some examples and non-examples of the concept or essential questions. Then you want to identify the distinguishing characteristics of what makes, in this case, a question essential or non-essential. Then we're going to test the theory against some new examples and refine our concept or our definition. Concept attainment is a great strategy that you can use with your students in a myriad of ways, and then hopefully by working through this together, this will help you not only better understand essential questions, but give you a new strategy for your back pocket. So first things first, let's look at some examples of essential questions and some examples of non-essential questions. All right, so first essential question. What do effective problem solvers do when they get stuck? Or is there ever a just war? Or what should we eat? And finally, should it be an axiom if it is not obvious? These are all examples of good essential questions that would help drive your instruction. Some examples of non-essential questions might be, what steps did you follow to get your answer? What key event sparked World War I? What foods are in the dairy group? Or I meant dairy, pardon me. What foods are in the dairy group? Sorry, science guys. And by what axioms are we able to prove the Pythagorean theorem? So I want you to take a minute or two and I want you to look at these two lists, hit pause if you need to, and I want you to think about what makes the questions in the left-hand column different from the questions in the right-hand column. Why are these questions on the right not considered good essential questions to guide the instruction and the learning throughout a unit? This is where we would have had a great class discussion and we would have been listing things on the board and giving examples and it would have been splendid. But alas, here I am, I can hardly walk and I'm talking to you through a screen. So let's look at it together. So let's look at some of these distinguishing characteristics. Let's start with the essential questions. By looking at the essential questions on the previous slide and the ones in the slides before that from the ELA and math examples, hopefully what you have inferred is that essential questions require a demonstration of understanding, and not just that they've acquired knowledge, that they know facts or definitions, but we want our students to demonstrate meaning making and or transfer of knowledge, which we talked about earlier in this video. We also want to keep in mind that essential questions can have multiple answers. They're not confined to yes or no or one specific answer. They require our students to be able to understand the concepts and the skills in the class to the point that they can analyze them and deduct an answer. We also want to keep in mind that they're going to require justification. A student should be able to provide support for their response. Why are they answering the essential question in the way that they are? The other thing that I really like about essential questions is that they can and they should be revisited throughout and across your units. You know, one thing I highly recommend is that you touch on your essential questions at the beginning of the unit, go over it with your students. The enduring understandings as well. This is what we want to understand, and these are questions we want to be able to answer. And I highly recommend posting those where the students can see them in your classroom throughout the unit. You can refer back to them as you go all the way through that unit and maybe into units beyond. And by the end of the unit, from day one to the last day, hopefully when you revisit those questions, you'll start to see some growth in their responses, and you'll start to see, they will start seeing how these big ideas, can apply. They're going to make the meaning and they're going to transfer the knowledge to other concepts, other units, other situations. A lot of times our essential questions are generative. They raise other questions, probing questions to go beyond just that one. And they should be intellectually engaging because after all, we're holding our students to a high standard and we want to push them to that high standard. And these essential questions are a great way to do that. Essential questions do not simply address facts. Remember, we're looking at for understanding, meaning making, transfer of knowledge. So simple facts and definitions are not going to be addressed by essential questions. Essential questions should not be closed-ended, as in having yes or no answers or having only one answer that is correct. And the essential questions have to go beyond focusing solely on knowledge acquisition. Again, we're looking at the meaning making and the transfer of knowledge. So to wrap up our conversation about essential questions, here is a list of new essential questions. Well, first of all, do you think these are essential questions? So to what extent are science and common sense related? Think back to the things we were just talking about, requiring analysis of the content and being very open-ended, asking for critical thinking. And you should be able to determine that to what extent are science and common sense related that is an essential question. In fact, all 5 of the questions I have listed here are essential questions. Does capitalism ensure economic inequality? How does what I read influence how I read it? What do numbers show? What makes an answer reasonable? I apologize for that typo down there. But think about the reasons that these things are in fact essential questions. This last couple of minutes going over essential questions, this was again supposed to be an in-class activity where you kind of a think, pair, share, if you will. I apologize that we didn't get to do it this way, but hopefully by going through the steps you have been able to glean what makes a good essential question, because you're going to be writing your own for your curriculum map and unit. So now that we've talked about our established goals, our enduring understandings, and our essential questions, now we want to talk about what students should know and be able to do at the end of a unit. So now we need to look at performance objectives. What should students know and be able to do that will help us ensure that they've mastered the enduring understandings and can give thoughtful answers to our essential questions, hopefully demonstrating a mastery over the standards that we listed. So we need to know, what do the students need to know and be able to do to demonstrate their understanding by responding to the essential questions? What are we, the teachers, going to assess for to ensure mastery over the big ideas? And what knowledge and skills are we going to teach to? These performance objectives, as you can see, they're at the bottom of the stage 1 template, and this is as far as we're going to go for the curriculum map purposes. But we need to make sure that these are very, very clear, because when we go on into actually planning out units, the next thing we're going to look at is assessments. So these performance objectives should be able to dictate how we're going to assess our students to make sure that they do in fact know what we want them to know and be able to do what we want them to do. Keep in mind that as we're developing our performance objectives, we want to make sure that we are focusing not on acquisition of knowledge, but on meaning making and the transfer of knowledge. So can students apply what they've learned to a different topic or context? Can they explain it in their own words? Could they teach it to someone else if asked to? And therefore, we need to teach them in a way that's going to facilitate and assess for that understanding. So again, we're backward planning, and the goal is of knowledge transfer, okay? When you're fleshing out these performance objectives, you want to make sure that, again, you're focusing on understanding and transfer of knowledge. And so out of all the content that we could potentially teach from our textbook, from our curriculum guide, so on and so forth, what is worth understanding? Go back again to those enduring understandings and those essential questions. The big picture, what do they really need to know, to understand, to be able to do? And so the larger and transferable concepts and processes within and across our subject areas are the big ideas. And that's going to help us prioritize our teaching and focus our curriculum. It would be very, very easy to have an extremely long list of, I want my students to know this, I want my students to be able to do that. But we need to be able to narrow that down onto the really essential things that if they know everything in the left column and they can do everything in the right column, that is going to be able to be transferred to the other things that we do want them to know. So ultimately, as we use backward planning and we use UBD to facilitate our backward planning, we need to keep in mind that our job is to know where we want our students to end up so that we can effectively plan our lessons, our activities, and our assessments to get students there. And in this case, with the UBD template, we have like basically a pyramid. So coming back to our pyramid, if we're looking at the bottom of what students will know and be able to do at the end of a unit, these things should help make sure that they have mastered the enduring understandings, that they can respond to the essential questions, and those two things together should cover our established goals, the TEKS that we laid out for this unit. In the packet that you should have looked over of the templates and examples, that I put into eCampus last week, you'll see several examples for different content areas of what this stage 1 can look like when it's filled in. This one right here is for some New Hampshire math standards that you can take a look at if you'd like to. There are several more in that packet, and so I refer you there. So to recap, for stage 1 and our desired results, we need to make sure that we have our established goals, which is our state standards that we're going to address for a unit, our enduring understandings, which are the big ideas that require the meaning making and the transfer of knowledge, our essential questions that should guide our students' learning and give them something to focus on and be able to respond to and answer it by the end of the unit, again, using meaning making and transfer of knowledge skills, and our learning objectives, which will dictate what it is students will know and be able to do at the end of the unit. And that is stage 1. So now we need to talk about your curriculum map assignment, which is going to be due next week. So let's take a look at it. Okay, so for your curriculum map assignment, you can work individually or in groups of 2 or 3, no more than 3. And you're going to use UBD to develop a curriculum map for 3 consecutive units. It doesn't matter to me if it's the first 3 units, the last 3 units, or some 3 in the middle, but they need to be consecutive units. So they can be units 2, 3, and 4, or 4, 5, and 6, or 1, 2, and 3, whatever works for you. And keep in mind, a unit is 6 weeks. That's 30 instructional days, no holidays. Your curriculum map is going to need to follow these guidelines. You need to have an overall course mission statement. Then you need, for each of the 3 units, there needs to be 1 anchor standard, so big teak, the number, and then up to 3 substandards underneath that anchor standard. Your unit needs to have 2 to 3 enduring understandings and 2 to 3 essential questions. And remember, those 2 are going to match up. And each unit has to have 2 to 3 knowledge-based outcomes and 2 to 3 skills-based outcomes. Don't forget that you must specify the grade level and the content area or course that you're planning for. You can use available resources to help you plan, which might be existing curriculum guides, state-adopted textbooks. Your mentor teacher might be able to provide some advice, but you cannot be constrained by what you've already seen or experienced or what your school's or school district's curriculum guide says. That is a jumping off point. That's something that can help you figure out your scope and sequence of your 3 units. You want to think beyond what is already being done. We want to be fresh and innovative with our planning. Your curriculum map assignment is due next Friday, April 3rd at 11:59 p.m. 1 member of each group is going to email the completed curriculum map, which is going to be 1 single document. Email it to me at my regular email address, ndweber@tamu.edu. The curriculum map should be, again, a single document, and you must use the UBD Stage 1 format. I have loaded a Word document template into e-learning that you can just go and fill in all the spaces. And you want to make sure that in that email you send to me that the names of every group member is in the body of the email with the attachment. Your curriculum map has to have a cover sheet on the front of the 3 consecutive Stage 1 templates. That cover sheet needs to include the grade level and the content area or course for what you're going to be teaching, so 6th grade math or chemistry or whatever it is. It needs to have your overall course mission statement that is going to guide the 3 units. And again, all of your group members' names need to be on that cover sheet. Behind the cover sheet, you'll have your first unit, then your second unit, then your third unit, again, in 1 single document. So there you go. That's your curriculum map assignment. And I hope that everything I discussed in the last half hour has really helped you kind of wrap your brain around it and has really supported the videos that you watched last week and the templates that you looked over in preparation for today's class. If you have any questions, of course, you can always email me. And since the assignment is due next Friday evening, We are going to spend next Thursday's class in class. Y'all can work with your groups or on your own if that's what you're doing to kind of be finishing this up. And that way I'm there to answer your questions and to give you feedback. As I said in my email yesterday, I highly, highly, highly recommend, nay, I demand that you get a really good start on this so that Thursday, I don't want to see anyone starting from the beginning. I should see y'all coming together with what the individual group members have done. I want to see you refining what you've done and pulling it together into that final document. I mean, maybe y'all can get it emailed to me by the end of class on Thursday and just be done and not have to do anything on Friday. So I will be looking for that. Again, I'm so sorry I couldn't be in class yesterday. It has been a crazy whirlwind with this whole back situation, but as you can see, I'm sitting up for the first time in 2 days, so that's really exciting. And hopefully by next Thursday, I'll be on my feet and fully functioning again. But in the meantime, I hope y'all did have a fantastic spring break. I hope you have a wonderful, magnificent, splendid weekend. Be safe, make good choices, and I'll see you next week. Bye, guys.